Welcome to another Friday live session. And I want to welcome you here today because today we're going to be talking a little bit about grammar. And it's so important to think about grammar in the right way when it comes to the IELTS exam. And that's what I want to share with you today. So welcome if you're watching on YouTube or watching on Facebook. And during this session, if you have any questions as we go along, don't hesitate to ask your questions and I'll be happy to respond. If you're watching on the replay, don't hesitate to put your questions in the comments. I'll be happy to answer any queries or questions that I can. So let's talk about grammar. And it's really important when we start thinking about grammar, especially for the IELTS exam, that it is a thing that is measured in every section. And usually it'll be about 25% of your score when it comes to writing and when it comes to speaking. And I want to let you know 25% because, first of all, it's important to realize that you do need to be aware that your accuracy in grammar is worth 25% of your score, but also to realize that it's only worth 25% of your score. So you don't want to put too much emphasis on grammar to the point where you're trying to speak perfectly. Perfect grammar is not required. And if, for example, if you're doing the speaking test or a writing test, and it comes to looking at your grammar mistakes and what could happen, if you want a band score of 7, really, for a band score of 7, you just need to make sure that at least 50% of your sentences are grammatically correct and accurate. Again, you don't have to be perfect. When it comes to the IELTS exam, sometimes we put too much emphasis on trying to be perfect, that we don't speak naturally or write naturally. And it's important to understand that in the general exam and the academic exam, for example, in speaking, the test is identical. So when it comes to grammar, there's no specific or fancy structures or complex structures that you need to add, for example, in the academic exam. When it comes to writing, you want to make sure that you're expressing yourself clearly, even more than perfectly. So you can get a band score of 7, even if your IELTS exam, even if your grammar is not perfect. It does have to be at a good level, and at least 50% of your sentences should be perfect. But again, don't overthink it and put too much stress and anxiety into your preparation when it comes to thinking about grammar, because this can really cause you to try and speak mechanically or robotically instead of naturally. And when it comes to expressing yourself in writing, the same thing is true. You know, when it comes to the IELTS exam, you're not going to impress the examiner or the marker by having overly complex or academic or fancy grammar. It doesn't work that way. What's more important is that your grammar is at the level where you can clearly express your opinions. And as I listen to people speak and do practice tests in speaking, and as I review writing tasks that students send me, when it comes to grammar, I've noticed something very interesting. And that is that it's the little mistakes that cause you to lose the big marks. Usually in writing and speaking, It's not the big mistakes that cause problems. It's the little things that make a big difference. More often than not, when I'm reading an IELTS essay, for example, the mistakes that are made are mistakes that uh, come in grammar that you learn at a beginner level. For some reason, we seem to focus on trying to be too complex and fancy, that we get these complex structures fairly accurate, but then we kind of lower them by making a little mistake, whether it's an article or a subject verb agreement or prepositions, these little things that make a big difference. So what I want to share with you today is 7 tips for just making sure that you keep the little things in your grammar accurate, and don't overlook these by being so focused on trying to be impressive that you lower your score by making these little mistakes. So when it comes to grammar, as you improve your grammar, I think it's really important to keep it as natural and spontaneous and relaxed as possible. So one of the ways that you can improve your grammar is just by absorbing it, watching TV and reading, and see the patterns and recognize the patterns and structures of grammar as you listen and you read. And then also to make sure that you intentionally practice and plan for improvement in this area. And so what I want to do today is just make you aware of the little things that you can improve and make sure are not some common mistakes that are not a part of your writing and speaking. So the difference is, when it comes to the IELTS exam, to not only be aware of grammar and understand how it's used, but also to be able to improve your ability with grammar. In the IELTS exam, it's all about testing your skills, your English language skills. So it's your ability to use the grammar properly and not to use grammar that you're in danger of using improperly. So let's just take a look at the few of the things that are important for IELTS. These are the little things that make a big difference. And I'm going to share my top 7 with you. These are the things that should be so straightforward, the things that you learned early in your English language speaking, but make a big difference on the IELTS exam. So we're going to talk about simple present and present continuous, simple past, present perfect, the passive voice, word forms, definite articles, and prepositions. I think if you can be aware of these 7 things and make sure that these are always accurate and used in the proper way, you'll have success in the IELTS exam. So let's first of all talk about simple present. Simple present is the verb tense that we use to describe a fact or something we do as a part of our daily routine, our daily habits and activities. So, for example, every day I play football, or every day the train arrives at 6 o'clock. So we're using it for present activity and for scheduled activities and regular events and facts. So where does this come into play in the IELTS exam? Well, for example, in speaking section part 1, quite often you are asked to describe a part of your daily routine, something that you do every day, maybe according to your diet or your hobbies or your school or employment. And there's so many questions where all that's required is using simple present to answer the question. So this is something that you learn at an early level when you're learning English, but it's so important. And be aware that you don't have to use fancy exam structures. Why try to use present perfect continuous or future perfect continuous when a simple present answer will suffice. So just keep it simple. And when you're asked a question in simple present, answer it in simple present. The next one is present progressive or present continuous. And this is something where you describe something that you're doing right now. And again, this can come into play in the speaking section where you're maybe just trying to extend or give a little extra details about the answer to your question, and can often be combined with simple present to just extend an answer and display your grammar skills naturally. So for example, if you're asked, do you like to read? And you can say, yes, I read every day. That's simple present. And then you just add a little extra detail. Right now, I'm reading a book, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and I'm really enjoying it. So just by adding a present continuous sentence to your simple present sentence, you've extended your answer and given a good answer for the speaking section. So these, just be aware of the forms and the right occasion for using simple present and present continuous. And then we have simple past tense. This is where we describe a completed activity in the past. So when I was young, I played guitar. Julie sang a lullaby. But I want to tell you just another example of where simple past comes into the IELTS exam. And it's often in the writing section, and it's in writing task 2, where you're asked to describe a graph, a chart, or a diagram. So often you'll have to describe, according to the graph or diagram, what happened on a certain date or what happened in the past. And so when you're describing these graphs or charts, even if they have a time period, the time period will have ended in the past. It won't be something that's continuing in the future in every situation. So if you have to describe events or trends or things that happened in a period of time in the past, you're going to be using simple past. So this is an important thing to realize, that so often in writing task 1, you'll simply be using this past tense to describe an event or something that happened in the past. And again, in speaking and reading, if you're talking about something, an experience from your life, you may be using simple past. And then the next tense I want to talk about is present perfect tense. And present perfect tense is really when we connect something that happened in the past with something that's still taking place in the present. And we form it using the verb has or have with the past participle. So often you might be asked a question that has to do with some kind of change. How are things different now than they were before? And this is another situation of where you'll use present perfect tense. Okay, I used to eat a lot of fast food, but now I have changed my eating habits to try and have a healthier diet. So these are things, when you're talking about changes, present perfect tense is one of the most common tenses to use for talking about changes. How have things changed? And so often in the writing section or speaking, you'll be asked to describe a change that's taken place. And this is where you'll simply want to use present perfect. So we have these verb tenses that if we just become aware of them and the correct forms and the best situation to use them, We don't have to do anything complicated or complex. We just need to use the appropriate tense for the situation. One thing I do want to mention that can sometimes be helpful, especially in writing task 2, where you want to sound a little bit more formal, is to be able to use passive voice. But as you use passive voice, make sure to just, again, keep it simple. For example, if I were using active voice, I would say the engineers blew up the bridge, and that's simple past. But if I just want to have a little wider range of grammar and use a different verb tense and sound a little bit more formal, I can just change it to passive voice. The bridge was blown up by engineers. So really what we're doing is we're just changing and flipping the sentence so that the subject becomes the object and the object becomes the subject. So if I say the engineers blew up the bridge, in that case, the engineers are the subject. But if I say the bridge was blown up by the engineers, now I'm emphasizing and putting my focus on the bridge as the subject and saying what happened to it. So just be aware. Again, don't try to be too complicated or complex, but the passive voice can be a useful tool for sounding a little bit more formal, for example, in academic writing task 2. So we've been talking about these verb tenses that are very common, and but they're very simple structures: simple present, present continuous, simple present, present perfect, and even passive voice. If you can use these simple grammar structures and be aware of them, you will have a better score on the IELTS exam. Because again, usually if we focus on the complex structures and we practice them, we will get them correct on the IELTS exam. And maybe we can use present perfect passive voice and make a very detailed complex sentence, but then we'll make a little mistake in it by leaving out an article or using the wrong preposition. So this is what I'd like to talk about as we continue. And these are the little mistakes to make sure that you don't make in your writing and speaking. The first is articles. Articles are little words that can make a big difference. If we use the article the, we're talking about a specific thing or a specific person or a specific place. That's why it's called the definite article. So for example, we're talking about the pirate, this specific person, the pirate. Okay, but if we use an indefinite article, which is one where we're not being specific, we can use a or an, and we're talking about any pirate, a pirate. Okay, now one thing about articles, let me give you a little hint of how they're helpful in the IELTS exam. And this is when it comes to trying to predict answers in the listening section. If you know that you have to put a noun to fill in a certain gap, if you see that a definite article like a or an in front of that gap, then you know that it's going to be a singular noun. If you see the, then you know that it could be plural, or it could be singular, or it could be countable or uncountable. This is the importance of just of articles, because number one, if you're writing a very complex sentence in grammar in the writing task and you leave out the article, no matter how fancy your sentence is, you won't get a good score. And when it comes to trying to predict things and fill in the gaps in listening or reading, articles can be a very good clue as to the type of word that you want to write in that gap. So you can see just a little thing like articles can make a big difference. And what about prepositions? Prepositions are words that tell us where or when something is in relation to something else. So the most common prepositions are prepositions of time and prepositions of place. And so here's some examples of prepositions of place. The apple on the plate, the noises at night, the water in the bucket. These prepositions of place, in, on, or at, can make a big difference for your grammar accuracy. Just little words like in, on, or at. These are the types of things that you want to be aware of and make sure that you use your prepositions correctly. Okay, so, and what about prepositions of time? They're the same prepositions as prepositions of place, in, on, or at. So if I see that if I want to use the preposition in for time, I'm going to say in January or in 2010. If I see the preposition at, I'm going to say at midnight, at 8 p.m. I'm going to be more specific. And if I see in, I'm going to say in the evening, in the morning, in the afternoon. If I see on, I could say on the weekend, okay, on Tuesday, on Wednesday. So it's just a really good idea to become aware of the little things that make a big difference. So articles and prepositions, if you could have the fanciest, most complex grammar structure in your sentence, but if you use the wrong preposition or the wrong article, this can make a big difference. So what's the best strategy for improving your grammar? First of all, just do your daily routine, the usual stuff, absorb it with your listening and your reading. And then you can plan and practice. And this is your intentional way of improving your grammar. One of the best ways that you can improve your grammar is simply by writing and speaking every day. And if you want to correct your own grammar and improve your own grammar, simply write something every day. Take 5 minutes and write something. And if you write this on your computer, you can simply do a grammar check, notice the grammar mistakes, and then do the research yourself and learn what you need to know to fix those mistakes. And you can find resources for improving your grammar in thousands of websites on the internet. But the key is to just write every day. And then to improve your speaking skills, the next step is to just read what you've written out loud. Does it sound right? Does it sound grammatically accurate? So by proofreading, you can improve your grammar. And then to practice speaking, even if you're by yourself, just take your phone and record yourself talking about something for 2 or 3 minutes, and then listen back and check your grammar. This is something that you can do on your own. And then if you discover that you really need help with certain areas in grammar, this is where you can find a tutor or a teacher who will help you improve. It doesn't happen overnight. Learning English is a lifelong experience, but it takes months and years to get to an advanced or high intermediate level. But once you've reached that level, don't endanger the score you get on the IELTS exam by making the little mistakes that make a big difference. I hope you found this helpful. I just wanted to take a few minutes today to just give you the message that the little things in IELTS can make a big difference. Don't try to be too fancy. Don't try to be too complex or complicated, but just make sure that the little things are always accurate, and this will help you raise your score and have success on the IELTS exam. So I want to just wish you all the best as you continue to prepare. Don't hesitate to reach out. If you're looking for resources and want suggestions, just ask me in the comments. And if you have any other questions about the IELTS exam, I'll be happy to do my best and answer those questions. All the best as you continue your preparation for the IELTS exam.